Ladies and gentlemen, my name is KFC Legends and it has been a really long week. The Supreme Court is doing all sorts of goofy stuff and pissing off a lot of people, but right now I'm sure that there's one question on everybody's minds. Where do the Supreme Court justices fall on the KFC Legends tier list? You have come to the right place. Today, I will be judging the Supreme Court justices based off of 3 different metrics. 1. How sexy they are. 2. How chatted they are. And number 3. How would they treat a minimum wage restaurant employee such as myself. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is KFC Legends, aka Asian Bruce Lee, and I will be your host for tonight's tier list. Now, you may be asking yourself why I'm not judging them based off of what their political beliefs are. The answer is simple, it's because I'm fucking stupid and I don't know anything. First up is Amy Coney Barrett. There's something oddly horrifying about her appearance. In fact, just to show you what I mean, let's do a goofy little experiment right here, right now. Look at Amy Coney Barrett for about 5 to 10 seconds without feeling some sort of a primal, visceral fear, just pure abject terror. In fact, we can conduct it right now. I don't know about you guys, but I think I did pretty well personally. She kind of reminds me of that really old art piece called The Scream. There's just something about them that's really terrifying, but you can't really put it into words, but nevertheless, they are just both really scary to look at, and just very unsettling. All in all, Amy Coney Barrett scores a negative 28.72 out of 10 on the sexiness scale. It's also for that same reason as to why she scores a 0 out of 10 on the Chad scale. I mean, just look at her. You can tell that Amy Coney Barrett gets 0 bitches. Literally 0 hoes. And for our final metric is how well would Amy Coney Barrett treat a minimum wage restaurant employee such as myself. Listen, I've worked in restaurants ever since I was 12 years old, and I've worked in over 5 Chinese restaurants, and I still do it to this day. I've seen all sorts of people, and I sort of have a really good feel of what they would act like inside of a restaurant. So that's one of my metrics. Amy Coney Barrett looks like one of those people that walks into a restaurant. She's pretty nice and she's pretty kind to the cashier, except that the only problem is that she's just so incredibly creepy that the cashier just freaks out and he can't do his job because she's just watching him. All in all, I'd say that's about a 3 out of 10 on the restaurant tier, which finalizes her into the F tier, aka the James Corden tier. Next up is my boy, John G. Roberts Jr. I mean, just look at him. Now look at him again. Now look at him a third time. Did you remember what he looks like any one of those times? No, you did not. Don't lie to me. He is a literal NPC, the very definition of one. Get this, he married somebody called Jane and he has 2 children, Josephine and Jack. His family consists of Jane, Jack, Josephine, and John. A literal NPC if I've ever seen one. If everything that ever happened, all of reality as we knew it turned out to be a simulation, John G. Roberts and his family would take up about 2 lines of code. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hating. There's nothing wrong about being an NPC. In fact, I think it's actually really cool that he managed to become a Supreme Court justice simply by just existing. And being an NPC is incredibly Chad out of him, which is why I'm going to grant him a 10 out of 10 on the Chad factor. He seems like the sort of guy that would walk into a restaurant with his family and kids, he smiles and signs and waits patiently and leaves a $10 tip, and he doesn't cause any trouble for anybody. He's just like the perfect NPC. Goes around, has like 10 interactions a day, has a little bit of fun here and there, and then he just dies. Perfect. All in all, he scores a mystery out of 10 on the sexiness factor because I don't really know what he looks like. I mean, nobody does. He scores a 10 out of 10 on the Chadness factor, and he also scores a 10 out of 10 on the restaurant employee scale, which places him at a very, very solid A tier. Next up is Brett M. Kavanaugh. He's basically like an evil version of John G. Roberts Jr. He is completely forgettable until you look at him closer, and then you just realize to yourself, wow, this Brett M. Kavanaugh guy gets 0 bitches. Literally none. Not a crumb of coochie about him. All in all, we're going to place Brett M. Kavanaugh into a solid James Corden tier. Next up is Samuel A. Alito Jr. I don't know, the guy just seems kind of like a slime ball. He seems kind of slimy and gross and weird to look at. He's basically like Quagmire from Family Guy if Quagmire was white and lame. He scores a 2 out of 10 on the Chad scale and sexiness scale for those reasons. He's sort of the type of guy that will go to a restaurant and be nice or whatever to the cashier and smile, and he'll try and be charming, and then he'll leave a $0 tip on a $250 order. 2 out of 10 on the restaurant worker metric, so he will be placed into the James Corden tier. Next is Clarence Thomas. His sexiness factor, 4 out of 10, mid. His Chad factor, 5 out of 10. Also mid. It's kind of hard to really get a read on the guy because there's not really a lot that stands out about him or his appearance or what he does. So I'm just going to give him really solid C tier. C for Claire. I've just made a huge mistake. I realized that his name was actually Clarence, which is like the lamest name of all time. So unfortunately, because of that, we are going to have to drop him straight into D tier. Next up on the list is Sonia Sotomayor. Some people might look at her and say that she kind of looks goofy, but at first glance, she kind of looks Asian, which puts her into an instant A tier. A for Asian. In fact, she does kind of look a little bit like me, which is why I'm going to instantly give her a 20 out of 10 on the Chad and sexiness scale, since, you know, I'm like the handsomest man on earth or whatever. Like, I know that most of you guys wouldn't really get it, but people like me and Sonia, we are capable of pulling over 300 hoes a year. So that's why I'm going to put her in as an easy S tier. S for Sonia Sotomayor. Next up is Neil M. Gorsuck. Neil Gorsuck my dick. Next up on the list is Ketanji Jackson. She has a cool name, so I'm going to put her in an instant B tier. She also has this sort of appearance where you look at her and you're like, yeah, I bet she pulls mad hoes. So she's going to score a solid 8 out of 10 on the sexiness and Chad scale, which bumps her up to a solid A tier. Finally on the list is Elena Kagan. Now if you look really carefully, you'll notice that she bears a striking resemblance to the troll face. I mean, wow. That resemblance is uncanny. That instantly gives her a 12 out of 10 on the Chad scale and a 30 out of 10 on the sexiness scale. Unfortunately, she falls off quite a bit when it comes to the restaurant worker scale because she looks like the sort of person that will come into a restaurant and just cause problems for the staff. She looks exactly like one of those people that will make all sorts of unfunny jokes with the cashier and she'll laugh at her own jokes while the cashier just wants to go home. What a fucking bitch, am I right? Normally I would put her in James Corden tier, but because she does kind of look like a troll face, I am unfortunately going to have to give her the benefit of the doubt and put her in a solid B tier. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the full Supreme Court tier list. If you disagree with the tier list, feel free to let me know in the comments below. Am I going to change my mind? Absolutely not. No way. Why? Because my opinion is always correct and is objectively the best opinion possible. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is KFC Legends and I am honored to have been your host for tonight's tier list. Thank you so much for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.